Hey there people, my name is Wyatt and welcome to High Point Music's online guitar tutorial. So today we're going to tackle a bit of a big issue with the guitar. We're going to start discussing how to actually solve the problem of the fretboard. And in this process, we're going to look at three basic ways in which you can approach the fretboard in terms of learning scales. And as well as that, I'm going to go through and discuss a bunch of ideas, what I think are pros and cons about all of these concepts, and also share with you guys out there all of my experience from my practice and tens of thousands of hours of practice over the years to help you people out there simplify the fretboard and really come up with a specialized approach so you can start targeting it in a way where you're getting the results in the style that you want to in the fastest possible time. So we've got a fair bit we're going to get in, discuss and look at in today's tutorial. So let's drop this intro and get straight into it. Okay, so starting off people, when it all boils down to it, there's basically three ways in which you can approach learning the fretboard and learning your scales on the guitar. So the first method we're going to look at is the cage system, which is very, very popular and gets spoken about a lot. I'm going to break down what that is, talk about some pros and cons I've had of going through the cage system. Second one we're going to look at is a 3-note per string approach to the fretboard. Again, discuss pros and cons, how we can look at that, who it might be suited to, and lastly we're going to look at a horizontal approach to learning your scales. So let's jump straight into the cage method. So what is the cage method? Basically the cage method is a way in arranging your scales over 5 positions throughout the fretboard. So for example people, if we're working in C major, so that there is a C major scale, and in the cage system that is referred to as C form. If we come back to the fretboard here, that's another form of C major, that one's called A form. We move along. Okay, that's G form, keep pushing along people. Okay, E form, and then D form there. So for those of you who were paying attention there, that one C, A, G, E and D form there of the cage system. So effectively the benefits of the cage system in my opinion is it's a really good way of actually making the fretboard make sense. So what I mean by that is it gives you those 5 forms and teaches you by going through it in the cycle of 4ths or 5ths, whichever way you go about it, a way in which you can navigate through all the different forms on the guitar to make sense of it all. So you can see how you get all of these major scale positions. There's C for example, F, B flat, E flat there for example. So I won't go on and on through all of the major keys there, but what's really cool about that is for me when I was learning this, it really helped the fretboard make sense. So even though you're only working in one area, you're actually learning how all these scales fit together. And a really beneficial part of the cage system I found personally was if you're actually going through and saying the notes out aloud, learning your key signatures as you were doing it, it was a really, really beneficial way of actually learning the notes on your fretboard, as well as giving you a really good foundation for voice leading, particularly if you're interested in jazz improvisation. Cool, other points about the cage system which I think are really, really important moving forward and can really have benefits in other areas of your playing is to actually, when you're practicing the cage form like this, is to actually use your chord shapes and incorporate your arpeggios as well. So for starters, it's very natural for people to learn this in 1 octave. So for example, you'd have C major, play your major 7 chord like that. Then you would play your scale for example. And then you would have your arpeggio. So that way when it comes to improvising down the track, you're learning how your chord, how your scale, and how your arpeggio fit together. So when it comes to express yourself through your own guitar playing, you'll have all these options in which you will know how the scale fits into the chord, where the notes are in the arpeggio. So on top of that people, it's really, really important I think when you're practicing this stuff is to treat it with a 2-pronged approach. So what I found with the cage system over the years was, yes, it was very beneficial for actually learning your fretboard, learning all your major scales, all your modes, how they fit together. But what I find the further down the road I get with this stuff is that, yes, the cage system is brilliant in simplifying the very complex beast that is the fretboard and giving you a really good foundation of learning your scales, learning your notes, learning your arpeggios. However, I haven't found that it's translated that well into a natural way of playing on the fretboard, at least for me personally. And the reason why I say that is it doesn't help, in my experience, it hasn't really been beneficial in playing in a lineal fashion. So what I mean by that, people, is being able to express ideas in a really smooth and linear way, often expressing yourself up one string or using the arpeggio and extending it out, much in the way a singer, for example, might formulate their vocal lines. But in saying that, that's not a knock on the cage system. It's very, very important, very effective for helping learn this stuff. But I would advise you, when practicing this stuff, to actually practice your scale, get to know your chords, get to know your scale, get to know your arpeggios, but also approach your scale practice, people. I cannot stress this enough, with an improvisational factor where you can explore, and explore in the sense where you're learning how to become accustomed to your own intuitive voice as a musician. So you're hearing melodies, you're trying to explore notes, hearing how certain notes fit over certain chords, and that's something you should always start exploring from day one. It's not enough just to practice scales and be able to play them up and down. You want to be able to use them in a really musical way. Okay, the second approach we're going to look at, people, is the 3-note per string method. So what that is effectively 4 positions on the guitar where you're playing your scales like in a fashion like this. So in C major, alright, so what we've got there is quite simply 3 notes per string. Just like that. So the benefits of this approach, I found personally, is one, it really, really simplifies the technique. So it simplifies the shape that your fingers have to play on the fretboard, and it simplifies your right hand technique. Because you're only playing 3 notes per string, your technique can simply just fall back into its mode and not have to think too hard. So as opposed to the cage system where you'd have 2 notes per string, then 3, then 3, then 2, 3, it varies a bit, so you can never really get a big flow on with your technique, or particularly if you want to play really long lines like... just for example, just blabbering around in C major there. But that's one of the really big differences in using this method. So if you're someone who's really, really into your shred playing or fusion playing, or even just want to put together some of those really flowy, really fast lines, that is something that's going to be really beneficial. So I found, particularly with improvising as well, because the shape of your left hand is simplified, there's often a lot of really symmetrical shapes here. So you've got 3 notes per string, so you've got these little 2-note sort of block sort of formations here, where you can just use your 2 fingers there like that. Okay, so the pros and cons of this method using 3 notes per string: simplifies your technique left and right hand, and really allows you to think in and focus on those musical lines, particularly when improvising. One potential drawback is it's a little bit more complex if you were just in a learning phase of trying to get to know all your scales, all your modes across your fretboard. I think the cage system would be a better way to approach it. But I think once you get the cage system down, you can move through it. I think this style of actually learning how to play through your scales and using it as an improvisational tool of practice is really beneficial and adds an extra layer to your ability to express yourself on top of the cage system. So that brings us to the last approach we're going to get into today in our discussion, and that's getting through our scales horizontally. So for example, we're just going to take a C major scale, seems to be the key for the day, and just C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Okay, so as you saw there, I'm just practicing that scale horizontally up and down the fretboard. Okay, so one of the benefits of practicing your scales in a fashion like this is, as opposed to the cage system where it's quite compact, I'm sort of leaning away from, I don't want to use the word restrictive, but in an improvisational sense, I've always personally found it a little bit restrictive. The benefit of a horizontal approach is for me personally, it's always allowed a much simpler playing field or much simpler pathway to be able to just focus in on your melodies and express them and follow those melodies. So you can go a bit more of a dance with your melodies when you're playing them, because you're not sort of having to sort of adjust constantly as you would by playing the cage system. And the other thing too is this approach allows you to connect your lines a bit more. So like the cage system, it's very difficult unless you sort of want to make really big jumps. So you can have really expressive, really big slides, for example, in which, if you're rocking out and you want to... So for example, a line like that would be very difficult, let's say that. Never like to say impossible, but very difficult to play within the cage structure. So that for me is a really, really beneficial way to approach your playing as well. And I think the best way to approach practicing the scales is once you start to get a bit more of a foundation with perhaps say your cage system and your other, perhaps going through the 3-note per string method, you can then put on a backing track in a key that you need to work on, develop your fluidity across the fretboard, and then just solo, breaking down little pathways. So I've always thought of it as if you're sort of cutting grass or mowing a lawn. You get really comfortable with carving out that little pathway so you know how to walk, for example, going between these 3 notes here. Okay, you get really comfortable with how your fingers move, how to arrange your fingers, and that allows you to have a bit more confidence while formulating your line. Cool, all right, so let's talk about a few extra points, people, before we wrap this up, sharing a bit of my own experience to help you sort of fine-tune your approach with scales. So if you're someone who wants to learn scales and you want to fine-tune the best way that's going to be best suited for your musical taste that you want to learn to play on the guitar. For example, if you're really interested in heavy metal playing, I wouldn't overly push you into going through all your major modes in the cage system to start out with. It's not really the way to go about it. I'm not saying don't learn that stuff and it doesn't have a benefit, but I think the most important thing to do when you're learning guitar and when you're learning music is to head directly towards the music, and particularly the genres of music which really speak to you and really invoke a sense of inspiration or passion with your playing. Because if not, there's no point taking an alternate route. If you want to play metal, you want to play rock, there's no point learning jazz. If you want to play jazz, there's no point studying classical. You want to take the direct path to the style of music that you want to become a master at and you really want to learn and you really enjoy playing. So to that end, people, I think it's very, very important that once you know exactly what you want to do and what you want to play, that you find yourself a really good instructor and teacher who can help formulate a personalized plan to get you going along that pathway. And with your scale practice, people, it's really beneficial. Just start small. Start with one little excerpt. One scale, for example, could be a scale and a backing track that you work with. So for example, if you were interested in blues playing or rock, you might start out by just learning a pentatonic scale. Okay, so you would practice that one up in its position, and then what you would do is once you get really comfortable with that, we'd look at putting down a backing track. All right, so I've queued up my looper, so just something really simple. So, okay, so we've got our backing track, and then with that backing track, you actually start working on trying to develop some licks in the style. So you're using the scale to express yourself in the way that you want to be able to do it. So, and 2, and 3, and... So that's a really simple example of how you actually go about learning a scale, practicing it up, and then learning to apply it in a musical fashion. So with that and all we've discussed, people, that should go a long way to helping you, one, understand the fretboard and maybe the best way to approach it for you personally, depending on where you're at with your playing. You could be experienced, you could be a beginner just starting out and trying to make sense of the dragon that's the fretboard. All those ideas are going to be really helpful in just giving you a bit of a direction, and also when you couple that with the idea of knowing exactly what end, what destination point you want to reach with your playing, whether it's blues, rock, jazz, fusion, or just a blend of everything in between. So you can really become anything you want to on the guitar. You just have to have the right plan and the right approach to do that. So with that, people, I hope this has been really helpful in shedding a bit of light on the subject and solving a few problems and questions and simplifying the issue for you people out there. If you'd like to get my help personally with anything we've discussed there, I'd absolutely love to hear from you. You can follow the links below and book a one-on-one consultation with yours truly to get you going on your musical journey and fine-tuning your approach. On top of that, people, if you want to support the channel in helping us pump out exclusive content like we have today, you can do so by either making a one-off donation via the PayPal donate function, or you can sign up to our basic support tier on Patreon, which is as little as 50 cents a week. Really helps us with our production costs and allows us to keep making high quality content for you wonderful viewers out there in YouTube land. Other than that, people, if there's any questions or anything you'd like to see coming up on the channel, by all means get in touch. We love hearing from you people out there. Practice it up, people. It's been a real pleasure today. A lot of fun talking about these ideas, and I look forward to seeing you all in future videos.